applied Stoicism from a Stoic that has been practicing for 26 years. Now, I would identify myself as a modern Stoic uh, in that sense of the term. Um, my Stoicism came about just before 9/11 happened, after reading Epictetus. I was in the military. Usually when you're in infantry, at some point you're going to come across James Stockdale. And, after reading his story and what he had talked about in philosophy, and I had been reading philosophy since I was young because of a turbulent childhood, seeking, happiness or those types of things. And what I learned is I was really aiming at the wrong target. 9/11 happens, I had to really apply Stoicism and double down on what I had learned. But the thing that I had learned more than anything, and what struck me so hard, was I realized that Epictetus was more free than I had ever been in my life. And he was a real slave. I had already read Meditations, I had already read Seneca's work, and Epictetus really resonated with me. And the reason why he did is we had similar backgrounds in the sense that we weren't raised with a silver spoon in our mouth. I had come from humble beginnings, his worse than mine, obviously. But it resonated with me and I realized I was a slave. Now, I had been rage against that when, I'm Gen X. I grew up in the late 70s and 80s and 90s. I grew up in the punk rock movement, understood that rage, metal. I understood it all. But I could not pinpoint what was wrong. And everything that I had tried, all the people that I had tried to listen to gain freedom wasn't working. But Epictetus really was free. He was free here. His freedom was so profound that we're still talking about this man a couple thousand years later, and he was a slave. And he earned his freedom with his mind, and literally did. So I wanted that kind of freedom. And what I realized much later, after applying Stoicism for decades, that most people are aiming at the wrong target. That they think that happiness and all of these kinds of other things are what you should be aiming for, and those are byproducts. The real target is freedom. The real target is equanimity. The real target is eudaimonia. You start aiming for those things, and all of the other stuff is just a byproduct of it. But freedom is a very difficult thing to wrestle with because there's a lot of weight that comes with freedom. The existentialists were very good at explaining this, the weight of freedom and the dread that comes with it, because that means we ultimately have to take responsibility for our life. We have to take responsibility for that freedom. And I think that there's some truth to that. But for me, I needed Stoicism. I needed a philosophy to guide my life by, so that way I could 100% learn how to be that free. By and large, most people do not understand what this pink organ stuck in this skull in the dark really does, or learns how to deal with it. Very few people are taught how to critically think. Very few people are taught how to reason. Most people don't come to those skills until much later in life. Most people don't know how to emotionally regulate or emotionally intelligent. Lord knows I wasn't. My first critical thinking class wasn't until I was 20 years old. I really came to understand that application of Stoicism is a hell of a lot different than just speaking about it academically from the White Tower. I know most of the Stoic authors have interacted with them the past 10 or so years. I've kind of laid low, not really publicly talking about it or writing about it or this and that and the other. Now, I have an elite education. I graduated from a school that celebrities have had to go to jail trying to get their kids into, and I did really well in that school. I have been applying Stoic principles in therapy for over 10 years. I have been applying it to myself for over 25. That's the perspective that I come at Stoicism about. That's not, I think Marcus Aurelius was a brilliant man. I think that Seneca, is a complicated man, but definitely knew some things. He was wise. And Epictetus was beyond wise on a lot of fronts. And all the reasons why these men are is because they applied it for decades of their life under the most turbulent circumstances. And I can't emphasize this enough. Learning Stoicism during war or a 100-year fire like we just had here on Maui, or through divorce, or through death and loss and natural disasters and all of the stuff that human beings do to each other. Once you've applied it for a long time, there's a difference. You understand it differently. I liken it to chess, where the rules are very simple to understand, but applying it and become a sage or a grandmaster in chess is a lifetime worth of work. And it struck me that Epictetus, his first thing that he says, this, the eudaimonia that you seek, the freedom that you seek, really is understanding the difference between what you can control in that very small circle of things that you can, versus accepting the things that you cannot. And there is a ton of bullshit you can't control. You can influence it. I get it. We're smart primates. We always constantly trying to control our environments but we way overreach what we can control and what we can't. And more often than not, a lot of misery in people's lives is caused because they do not understand their own minds. They do not even understand what they can actually control or not. That simple idea alone, you would be shocked how many people don't get it or apply it. And I have yet to meet a person that could naturally do it. It had to be taught. Had to be taught. The major criticism to Stoicism is that you become unthinking. And it's actually not it. They're actually wrong. And I agree with Farnsworth's defense of it. The reason why Stoicism is called the philosophy of 1,000 trials, the reason why you're seeking long experience, is because the more experienced you become, you can fast track this experience with application over time, that you just respond differently to things. The emotions that arise in you are different. And so a long experienced surgeon that comes out to tell a family that their loved one is gone, that has been learning and refining how to talk to families and how his own responses are and processing these emotions, the emotions that arise are different. Not less sympathetic, not less than this and that and the other, but for the family, it's the first time they've had that experience. So it's going to be, their emotions are going to be much different. I think people misunderstand the difference between long experience and not. I had this experience in the military. My first squad leader, I was really lucky that I had a Vietnam vet that had 2 tours under his belt when I went to my first unit. And I never will forget the lessons I learned. But under the most stressful situations, he was calm as a Hindu cow. And I realized that his calmness was because of experience. His calmness saved lives. And he applied it over and over again. And it took me years to figure out what it was. And all of these things came to the same conclusion. Experience is good. Applied experience is way better. Understanding what is in your control, no matter what is going on, will radically change your life. You will experience eudaimonia. And more importantly, you will learn how to be free.